subdivisions. There we go. Okay, tasks for this week are going to be to, again, as always, keep working on whatever clefs, treble or bass, of those two clefs, whichever one is your weakest one. Your job this week is to find a piece of music and stare at it and make yourself say the note names and get increasingly faster at it. So again, you say, well, but I always play treble clef. I never play bass clef. Too bad. Find yourself some bass clef music, maybe the piano part of a piece you're working on, for example, or something like that. If you have trouble finding something, let me know by email and I will send you probably some link to something. I'm sure I can find you something pretty easy. If you guys would like, I could, although it's a lot of postage, but I could actually send anybody that wants it an old used church hymnal, which those are fantastic resources for all of your theory semesters, because you can actually write, because it would be yours, you could write in it, you can practice clefs, you can practice Roman numerals. When we get to Roman numerals, you can practice intervals. So if you think you would like to have an old, no longer needed church hymnal as part of your personal library for theory study, maybe just let me know in the next, let me know by email with your current address so that I can put that in the mail. I'll probably send it book rate, so it might get there, I don't know, maybe in 10 years, but I'm gonna probably send it the cheapest way possible. Okay, so your first task is to keep practicing on one of those clefs. And our other tasks this week are going to be to start the scary looking C clefs, which are alto and tenor clefs, and so are new to most of us. We're gonna work a little bit more with time signatures and rhythm. And again, for this week, I'll stick with the simple time signatures, which may seem simplistic to you, but I think if you have really a more thorough understanding of that half of time signatures, it gets better. It'll be good for you. And then we'll close with a little bit of singing where I sing, but you stay muted. And you sing back. It's just that nobody else is hearing you. And that's just, again, practice with vocalization and with also starting to get a little solfege learned for those to whom that is new. So I'll talk more about that later. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And there we go. Okay. And here is let's see if I can make this bigger. Let's do a little writing exercise. I think we're going to jump right into bass clef, okay? So if you have your piece of staff paper, or you're making one, or if you have your little dry erase board that you have, we're going to do writing exercise number 2. So your job is to put on the staff these letters as appropriate notes. They can be high or low, maybe experiment with a low B or a high B. And let's see what we come up with there. Okay, let me move this out of the way. And I'll put the answer up on my little page, so when you are ready, you can look at mine. Whoever's not muted and is singing, maybe just, we love your singing, but you might be a little distracting.
Thank you, my bad.
No problem.
I didn't realize I was unmuted.
Better to sing than not sing, I think, though.
Well, thank you. I agree with that.
Let's see. And what's the last one? Okay, so when you're ready to look, I'll hold mine up here and you can give it a look when you're ready. And again, there are other possible answers because there is more than one C in bass clef and more than one D and more than one A. You can see I put a really wacky one at the end there. I used some ledger lines. I think a lot of us have a little guilty ledger line underappreciation. We should probably root that right out and get better at our ledger lines. Okay. Does anybody have a question about theirs? If you want to hold it up, if you're not sure about one, or you want me to just check it for you, I'll be glad to do that. But you don't have to if you feel pretty confident. And again, the question to ask yourself is, are you getting faster, even a little bit, as you work on these things? Okay. All right, anybody need to see mine anymore? We're good? Okay, so it is time to go to C clefs. Wow, here it is, the C clef. This really is one of our oldest clefs. The C clef was one of the first ones that our friend Brother Guido invented in the 900s when he was inventing clefs, along with the F clef or the bass clef. The treble clef, as we know it, was a little bit later in showing up and being useful. But the thing about the C clefs that has stayed consistent all the way through history is that it's actually a movable clef. In other words, you can plunk that clef on any line of a staff and it tells you one great, wonderful thing. It tells you where is middle C, that very note on the piano that is the C right where the maker's name is printed on a piano. So that C clef is not just telling you any old C, it's telling you this specific C. And if you look at my example here on the screen or on page 9 of your packet, you can see 3 different positions for this C clef. Now, why would they do that? Well, they did it so that most of the notes that the soprano would sing would end up on the staff. And most of the notes in the alto range, an alto presumably singing a little bit lower than a soprano, well, okay, the clef, look at it, it's centered on the 3rd line, it's lower down. In other words, it's showing us lower notes on the staff than this clef. And the tenor clef is lower still. And so the middle C is higher on the staff because it's trying to show us those pitches below middle C more often. Does that make sense, what I'm saying? Everybody okay so far? Yeah? Now, this was a really popular clef in the Renaissance because people weren't playing trumpet in B flat or clarinet in A or horn in D. They were playing instruments that were just like singing. You just walked up and you did it. You didn't have instruments in different keys. You just sort of did the same thing that the singers were singing. It was sort of a very what you see is what you get kind of approach. And so that's why the instrumental music of the Renaissance, a lot of it is written in these sort of C clefs because people were playing recorders and viols and they were singing it. They just mixed it all in. It was pretty cool. So let me see if I can go down here. Okay, so I'm going to go on to page 10 at the top here and just show you a little bit less confusingly how this works. In the modern day, we have really 2 positions of the C clef that are used commonly. The alto clef, which is the first one here, and that's where that point, sort of the center point of the clef is on the 3rd line, and that is middle C, that 3rd line. And that is used by violas. That's their favorite main clef. It's sometimes used by a couple other instruments. If you are an early music fan and you're playing viol da gamba, you would play this clef a lot. It's certainly a very specific clef when it comes to sort of modern orchestras and things like that. Viol is using it. The one below it, now if you notice the clef is centered on the fourth line, that's still middle C, even though it's on a different line or space. So again, that's the important thing, is these clefs are really like secret decoder keys to tell you what symbol is going to be attached to a particular line or space. They're movable. They can move around. It's okay. This tenor clef is used by bassoonists playing at the top end of their range. It's used by cellists playing at the top end of their range, and it's used by trombone players also playing at the top end of their range. So there are distinct groups of people that really do use tenor clef in our modern sort of instrumental situations. Singers, you will be glad to know, if we have any singers among us, that most of the old scores that used to have C clefs in them have been reprinted with treble and bass clef. Okay, so if we go back to the alto clef just for a minute, and let's just, this sounds kind of dumb, but if you just look at where each note is, as I've labeled it on the staff, and just like, let it soak in, absorb the C clef. So we start off with middle C, where my cursor is here, and then you go down to the bottom line, and that is F. Let's just accept that this is F in the alto clef. G, A, B, C, D, E. Okay, we're gonna just deal with alto clef first. I'm gonna come back to tenor clef maybe next time, because we're gonna run out of time. So on your staff paper, let's have you draw a couple alto clefs, like this one over here. Now you notice on the drawing, I made it really simple. It's basically like a curvy letter K. You could put 2 lines on it if you want to, maybe like this. But notice I'm not worrying about all the little swirly bits, because I'm not an engraver with an engraving tool. I am writing with a pencil, or in this case, a blue marker. Okay, so draw yourself an alto clef there, just to practice. And as you draw it, maybe tell yourself that that middle line is middle C, okay? Now, let's go down to the timed exercise number 1, and we're just gonna do the first line of it. So to yourself or out loud wherever you are, whatever, but let's see if you can figure out what these letter names are on this alto clef line. I'll give you maybe 30 seconds or 45 seconds to ponder, and then I'll start giving the answers, okay? Takes a little adjusting. It's like you have to flip a switch in your brain and get into alto clef. Okay, I'm gonna say these letter names, and maybe you wanna say them with me. I'll try and say them kind of rhythmically. By the way, some of you may have had a teacher in the past who has taught you a trick to reading a different clef, like, oh, just think of it as treble clef, but down 2 steps, you know, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I really urge you to not rely anymore on the tricks, but to really learn to read the clef itself authentically. It's like you're learning to hear or understand a new language. You just dive in and really do it. Okay, here I go. I'm gonna start at the beginning of the line. So I have A, E, C, B, F, G, octave, G, B, F. Okay. Again, if you want a little practice, you could always go back up to page 9, those of you who have your packets at the moment, and you could find the alto clef line, and you could do the same thing, and we may do that another time, but I want to save some time signature time, okay? So we're adding alto clef to our bag of clefs. Questions so far on alto clef? It might make your head hurt, but I suppose it's good for you. It is good for you. Okay, I'm going to turn now to the time signature time signature chapter. Oh, where is it? Sorry, scrolling. So much easier to turn the book. Okay. So we talked a little bit about rhythmic values last time. I wanted to cover a couple things that I skipped over. And here are some names of things, which certainly if you have two languages, maybe the names are different in another language. Maybe it doesn't translate to quite the same kind of term. So I just mentioned these things. And certainly when we're writing music by hand, it's good to also know these. So any note value that we use in Western art music has a note head, and many of them, most of them, have stems, but of course whole notes and brevs do not have stems. If it's a single note like an eighth note, it has a flag. And that flag will always hang to the right, whether the stem is pointing up or pointing down, the flag is always off to the right. So now you can be driven very frustrated by, somebody says, I'm going to make you a mask with printed music on it, and all the flags are backwards. And you say, no, I cannot wear that mask because of the flags, not because I cannot wear masks. Okay, if you join more than one flagged note together, you join them with a beam. Now, my little illustration has a beam sticking out. Presumably another note would be there. It was actually the font I was using, it just wouldn't behave. So we have beams, we have flags. No big deal. Small trivia, but now you know. Adding rhythmic values together. We can use the symbol called a tie. That is different really than a slur. A tie means that you are joining together two rhythmic values on the same pitch. So it makes basically a longer sound. The word slur, I just mention it again because it's easy for us to be sloppy about that. A slur joins notes of different pitches. A slur has to do with articulation rather than length of sound. That is joining sounds together. So I have tied two half notes together, and it's the same amount of sound as a whole note. Great, cool. Ties, of course, are handy when there is no other way to show how long a note is. You can tie notes together with lots and lots of symbols, lots and lots of ties, and sometimes there's a nice, easy way to join them together, and sometimes there isn't. Like tying together, well, actually I could do that one. Some of these, it's possible to actually show a single note value. Okay, another thing I didn't talk about, and this is the one where I'm gonna be happy to take questions, is the dot. A dot is a shorthand way of tying something. You have the original note, any dotted note means you have the original value, like a quarter note, plus half of its value again. So a dotted quarter equals a quarter note's length plus an eighth note's length. Cool. A dotted whole note is the same as a whole note plus half of its value or a half note. I can even have a dotted brev if you want. Okay, that part is pretty normal for most everybody, pretty comfortable with that, I would think. And the doubly dotted thing, I would guess that maybe that is reserved for those of us who have played lots of marches. As instrumentalists, we see this as a shorthand method. Adding a dot adds half of the half. So a doubly dotted quarter note is a quarter plus a half plus a 16th. That means, as I say, it's almost a half note. It's 1/16 short of being a half note. So instead of ga, da, 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 which would be a dotted quarter note, I would have to hang on to that note just a little bit more. Da, 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 da. I just need a little bit more to get that beat done. So doubly dotting is handy and fun to look at. I'm going to jump now. I'm going to skip this page again because, time, but I'll come back to it later this week. I'm going to jump back down to the time signature page. where we talked about what a simple time signature is, because I only talked about half the picture last time. I talked about how the time signature tells us what kind of note and how many beats. And that's if that top number is less than or equal to 5. So, for example, 5/8 down here in the corner tells us there are 5 beats and they are all eighth notes, okay? Now, if I take an eighth note, imagine you're holding an eighth note here, and you drop it onto your desk and it breaks. Oh, poor eighth note. How many pieces does the eighth note break into easily, automatically? Breaks into 2 pieces, right? Eighth notes break easily into 16th notes. Yeah. So a note that breaks easily into 2 equal parts tells us that this is a simple time signature. Simple meaning each beat has 2 subdivisions. For example, let me go back to the 2/4 one. And in fact, 2/4 time. If you think about 2/4 time, and in fact, I'm going to go back to my camera here for a minute so I can draw for you. Okay, 2/4 time, 2 beats in a measure. Each note gets the beat. All right, how do I count that? Well, the system we use at Schwab and tons of musicians, especially around the US and North America and South America use, is to just count the beats with number words. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Great. By the way, if there are 2 beats, it also can be called a duple meter. Duple meaning 2 beats. Duple. By the way, it's spelled this way, duple, not dupel, which is incorrect. So duple. Now, I'm going to break each of those quarter notes into its little composite pieces. One is still there. Here's beat 1, but now I've got a little extra part of beat 1. I'm going to call it and. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. That's the system. That's probably just the most common, the way that musicians speaking English generally know how to label beats. There are other rhythmic systems to label beats, but this is like if you're in a rehearsal and you say, can I play that on the end of 2? People will know. So notice that in this system, the number words still get the beats, and the little subdivisions, the extra little broken off short bits, get ands. The time signature 2/4 tells us thus 3 things. It tells us there are 2 pulses in the measure, 1, 2. It tells us those pulses look like quarter notes. And the fact that we are looking at a 2/4 time signature means you can assume that those quarter note beats get broken into 2 equal pieces. It is a simple meter. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. Okay? Likewise, if I have, let's take 3/8. 3/8. Imagine to yourself, or write it on your page, whatever you wish. How many beats are there in 3/8? Well, there would be 3 of them. What are they? I hope you answered. Eighth notes. Indeed, there are 3 eighth notes, and they get labeled 1, 2, 3. Oh, I'm writing messy here. When you actually do your theory homework, be not so messy as me right now, but that's because I'm writing fast. I have now broken those eighth notes into little 16th note pieces. Notice how I've grouped them. Anybody notice how I've grouped these little 16th notes? I've grouped them inside the eighth note beats. I could have beamed them all together, sure. But for right now, and I know somebody's going to say, but I've seen it done that way. Shh, don't tell us that now. We don't want to know, okay? For our purposes of understanding why time signatures exist and how they work, let's beam only inside the beats. Now our eyes can see, here's beat 1, here's beat 2, here's beat 3. How do I count that? Well, 1 and 2 and 3 and. Now those 16th notes look mighty fast. You might be tempted to say, well, doesn't that mean it has to go fast? But no, now you know better. They can go as slowly as you like to suit the hot weather that you are no doubt enduring. Okay? So for each time signature on that time signature page, one good thing to practice between now and Wednesday or Friday would be to, in the space next to each time signature, write out a measure that shows the beats like I have, and then put a bar line, and write out a measure that shows all the subdivisions like I have, so that your eyes understand how those beats break down into the next smaller subdivision pieces. Again, that may seem pretty obvious or simplistic, but I guarantee if you can just let your eyes absorb this, your brain is going to do wonderful things when it comes to music reading. Okay? We got plenty more conversations to have about this supposedly simple time signature topic. And we're going to keep doing that later this week, but I want to save, maybe 3 minutes here at the end to do some singing. So again, I think it's easier if you stay muted and sing on your end. But if anybody would like to do any singing work one-on-one, or you just want to check how your singing is, let me know. My plan for theory and oral skills for fall is that I will be available as a permanent tutor for all of you who wish it. And I can certainly help when you're doing singing and theory, anything. I mean, here I am in my little office in Tennessee, and so I'll be glad to do that. Okay, so we're gonna again sing something, and you're gonna sing right back after me. Okay, so I'm gonna maybe sing 2 notes. You echo those 2 notes right after I sing. Here I go. Do, 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 re, do, 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 mi, do, 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 mi, again. Do, fa, do, re, do, do. Okay, so we just started measuring the distance between different notes in the scale. Again, if you say, I'm not sure I know how this solfege goes, right now, this is not about cognitive knowing, it's about just imitating. So now I'm gonna sing 4 notes, and you echo those 4 notes right away. This is also gonna improve your tonal memory, which means that when you are doing like dictation exercises in skills class, this is the main, most important thing is, can you remember what I just sang and sing it back? Okay, here I go. I'm going to use the same pulse. Do, re, mi, do. Do, do, re, do. Do, mi, re, do. Do, mi, do, mi. Mi, re, mi, do. Do, do, fa, fa. Fa, mi, re, do. Okay, so we're starting to put some notes in different order. And again, we're not being super adventurous here because we want to build up a little vocabulary for your brain to recognize the different relationships of how notes relate to each other and to instinctively do some solfege. I will tell you in my last remaining minute here, if you wish to add the hand symbols to solfege, solfege, the do, re, mi stuff that we use in the modern times, was actually developed by a music educator named Kodai, partly to help deaf children learn how to speak, like how to modulate their voices. And so it comes with its own sign language, and it's actually a pretty useful tool. Like I will sign melodies when I'm singing them with solfege to myself, partly to keep myself focused so I don't get bored. But also it's a good, if you're sort of a kinesthetic learner, it can be a good thing. So I'll just show you these hand symbols for what we just learned, and you can do them with me. Here I go. This is do, re, mi, and then fa, fa. And the reason fa points down is because fa wants to go always back to me. Doesn't that feel nice? Fa goes to me, re, do. So just sing that scale once with me as we finish up here. Here we go. Do, re, mi, fa, mi, re, do. The last thing I'll just say before I sign off here is that if you are used to a fixed do system, that is a system where it's like saying letter names, where C, the note C, is the same as do. And what I'm teaching you is a movable do system, where do is always whatever scale we're in. And that's a really good system for the first couple semesters, especially of ear training. So it may be different for you, but just let me talk you into my version of solfege that way for a while. So, okay, any questions with anything that we have here? So if you wanted to know what you could practice, you could certainly practice C clefs, whichever of your treble bass clef is weak, and maybe look at those time signatures in that, of those simple time signatures. That would be a great thing to do. Okay, great. It's good seeing all of you. I really enjoy getting to see some actual people for parts of my week now. So thank you for joining us. So I will see you next time.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.